Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Peaty. I am the current board president for Publishing Professionals Network. And roughly once a month, we have an online Zoom professional development session. And this month, I'm really excited about the one that we're doing with MC Calvi. They are here with us and from Southern California and are going to basically we first met on one of our social Zooms a while back, which we have, I believe, roughly the third Thursday of every month. And we started talking about what kinds of resources we can have, especially editorial resources, to help out with either self-publishing or new authors, so that not too much of our time gets sucked into sort of bringing them up to speed on all things publishing related. And MC mentioned that they were putting together a resource list, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, share that, please, please, please." So that's what they are going to talk about today. But in the meantime, before we dive into our session, which I'm really excited about, I also want to talk a little bit about Publishing Professionals Network. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit. We have been around for over 50 years. And we used to be Book Builders West. We changed our name to Publishing Professionals Network back in 2012. And it's the kind of organization that I personally love because we are nonprofit and we are all volunteer. So this is really about community, supporting community on a very basic grassroots level. There are other great organizations that have paid staff and are much bigger and all that kind of stuff. And those are definitely very worthwhile. But Publishing Professionals Network fills that niche of those of us who just want to be there for each other. And I think MC's presentation today is going to be very much in that spirit. So I'm really looking forward to that. PPN, we are always looking for good board members. If you're interested in volunteering or joining us, please reach out. I'll put our email in the chat when I get a chance, but it's basically operations@pubpronetwork.org, which is obviously also our URL. And we do a couple of things every year to celebrate excellence in bookmaking, and one of them is the conference that we have been putting on every year. Not every year, but we're trying to make it annual if we can. And it will, again, this year be in April here at the David Brower Center in Berkeley. That's an in-person event. If you want to be a part of figuring out what that is going to be this year and help it put it together, please let us know, because we have a great team of people putting that together, and the more the merrier. Okay, so I've taken up the first 3 minutes. I try not to spend too much time pitching PPN, but it is a great org. It's only $25, by the way, if you want to join to be a freelance member. Larger companies cost a little bit more, but basically we're trying to make it as accessible for everyone as we possibly can. If you can, please put in the chat where you're zooming in from, anything about yourself that you want to do. The one thing that I would ask is we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. If you would be willing to, please go ahead and wait on your questions toward the end, so we don't have to like shuffle back through the chat to try and figure out whose questions are in what order and where they are, and we just would hate to miss out. So without any further ado, I'm not going to go into a long bio for MC. You can kind of, MC, if you want to do that, you can. It was also in the Zoom information and in the email blast that we sent out, but please feel free to give your background if you want. So I'm going to unpin myself, and that way we can focus on MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everyone. I'm MC Calvi. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I am a professional freelance editor. I've been in publishing for 8 years now, which it doesn't feel like that. And at the same time, it feels like so much longer. Also, forgive me if I am constantly pushing up my glasses because these are my spares and they don't fit as well. I am a professional nonfiction editor specializing in self-help, spirituality, psychology, and LGBTQ books. And I have had a great time working with clients ranging from indie authors to international publishers, and happily have been involved in PPN socially. So that's been really nice as well. So without further ado, let's get to the presentation, an editor's guide to first-time authors launching, learning, and leading. And this presentation will talk about working with first-time authors in general, specifically with a focus on building and leveraging pre-existing resources in order to save yourself time and help land clients. So first, let's talk about resources for the hiring process, which, you know, unconventional hiring process in the way we think of the term, but it gets the point across. When you're working with new authors, communicating with clients can take some extra time as you both figure out whether you'd like to work together in the first place and work out all of the details. New authors are often feeling confused, nervous, overwhelmed, and/or imposter syndrome, though they may or may not let on. One of the biggest things I have to say about working with new authors is don't wait until someone is willing to admit how much they need guidance or how much guidance they need in order to start offering that guidance. Like, obviously, don't be condescending, pretty obvious, but really lend them a helping hand. You know, I find a few as you may knows go a long way. Another really good strategy is to include the possible answers to a question in your question. So for example, instead of asking, how are you looking to publish your book? You might ask, are you interested in self-publishing, traditional publishing, or small press publishing? That's perfect because a lot of editors don't, or a lot of authors don't even know that self-publishing or that small press publishing is an option. And okay, I'm an indie publisher loyalist. That's where my whole career background is before I was freelance. So I'm biased here, but I really like putting that in particular because it's a great option for a lot of authors and it's a great deal more achievable than traditional publishing with the big five.
Hey, MC,
Yeah.
are you sharing your screen at all, or is that something you are going to do later?
Is it not sharing my screen?
No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
Uh-oh, that just me, it maybe means other people are saying that they are, so maybe my view just changed.
Okay. Other people are seeing it? Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you guys. Okay, yeah. So anyway, small press publishing, obviously great because small press publishing in general, also great because you don't need an agent to approach many small press publishers, especially if you're like me and you work primarily with clients working in nonfiction. So that's a huge advantage. It can shave off a whole year or more and so many rejections off of the submission process. In fact, actually, one of my policies is to advise clients not to pursue traditional publishing unless they're really, really deeply invested in doing so, because it's just such a long and arduous process and it just involves so much rejection. And so that's not fun for anyone generally. So anyway, raising the question of publishing like that is just one way you can anticipate and preemptively address a client's needs. When you're talking to a client, especially one that hasn't worked with an editor before, view part of your job as guiding them through the process of finding and hiring an editor, which is hopefully you, but may not be. You know, part of this is negotiating the ethics as well of like, can you deliver on these services? Are you a good fit for your needs, for their needs? Clients respond well when they feel that you see and understand their needs. Surprise, surprise. And that you're willing to help meet those needs, even and in some ways, especially if you're not in contract with them yet. You can view it as kind of like a lead magnet. You're showing authors the value you bring to the table before they invest monetarily. And it's easier to show that value if your pitch materials are detailed thorough, professional, and well-prepared. So this is a simplified timeline of what the client inquiry/hiring process generally looks like. It may be obvious, but I still feel like it's really nice to visualize it like this. There are three major areas here where pre-built materials can come in: the response to the client's initial offer, the client's initial questions, and the offer itself. The response to the client's initial request is especially a good place to use pre-written materials because it lets you respond to clients much more quickly and efficiently. Some clients will have reached out to multiple editors, and sometimes clients will actually back out of hiring an editor if they don't hear back within a day or two. Like really surprisingly fast sometimes, especially if they have found you through a freelance platform or marketplace like Upwork or Reedsy. So having some quick pre-written responses lets you get back to a potential client, even if you don't have the time or the bandwidth to really engage with their samples and their offer at that moment. Maybe you're between errands, maybe you're between meetings, maybe you're, just way too busy with projects or running out the house. But this way you're at least opening communication and starting that potential relationship using a message you've already written and can quickly tailor. So the process takes 2 minutes, easy. Simple responses you can have prepared include asking what type of editing the client is looking for, how they plan to publish, and asking for more key information, such as details about their book, word count, genre, timeline, the sorts of things that clients surprisingly often don't know to mention. All this goes for the initial question step of the process as well, because often this conversation will continue to unfold over back and forth. It's also a good idea, I find, to have a script specifically requesting a longer sample, as many first-time authors will send samples that are only 3 to 5 pages long or even shorter. Incidentally, I recommend not taking a project without a substantial sample. I do at least 30 to 40 pages, as you can end up with some unpleasant surprises otherwise regarding both quality and content. I've definitely had to back out of a couple editing projects in my time that I took on the basis of a very short sample, and then ended up finding out that there was content I was not ethically comfortable editing later in the project, which was a huge bummer. So requesting a set number of pages is an easy way to prevent that sort of issue. I also recommend requesting a set page count instead of the whole manuscript, specifically because a lot of new authors are very uncomfortable with the idea of sending their full manuscript to someone they haven't yet hired, out of fear their work will be stolen. And obviously we know that's not something we're interested in doing, but I find that it's easier to simply anticipate and accommodate this fear. It's understandable enough, for authors, especially new authors, their book is their baby. And, if it's coming from someone who doesn't understand how publishing works, I think that's totally reasonable and just worth the trouble to accommodate up front. So here's some potential types of resources you can prepare in advance, as well as ways to store them. Obviously, some resources will be a better fit for some formats than others. For example, I keep all of my pre-written offers in a Word document so I can scroll through them, see them all at once, compare them, and then copy paste the one or mix of more than one that fits best. In contrast, when it comes to quick queries or explanations of edits that go in the comments on a document, I store those in a text expander. We'll talk a bit more about text expanders later, but for those who don't know, text expanders let you type in a few letters and then autofill a longer text, kind of like a macro, basically. So I store these comments in text expander because it keeps my workflow smooth. While having a giant laid out document is really useful when you're looking at whole offers, having to scroll through a big Word document every time I wanted to find the right response to explain what the Oxford comma is or why we use italics instead of all caps for emphasis would be really disruptive, and it would get really tedious really quickly. Similarly, Canva to save and edit and PDFs to share work great for resources that you've designed and formatted for visual appeal, such as pitch decks and for portfolios. Word templates are also a great resource for this, especially when it comes to more text-based resources that have to be edited each time. Contracts, for example. Microsoft Word lets you create custom templates, which is great for writing things like contracts, building branded resources, which is also something I recommend, like style sheets, editorial reports. You can put your brand colors on them. You can put your name and your link, your watermark, and that's a great way to remind the author who you are each time they go reference the document. It also just looks so much more sleek and professional than a simple text document. Similarly, I know Excel and PowerPoint are a bit odd to have on here perhaps, but Excel can be great if you want to be able to sort and filter responses easily. And PowerPoint is surprisingly useful for like if you want to do a social media campaign or visual templates where you want to be able to flip through them really quickly. So building pre-written offers. Now we've come to the area where I would argue that pre-written resources are the most useful. By offer, if it's not clear, I mean work proposals. The what, when, how, and for how much of each project. The email or message where you lay out what you're going to be offering and what working with you is going to entail. Pre-writing your offers lets you do several important things. Save time while still offering thorough, plentiful detail, and optimize your wording. Authors, especially new authors, will frequently not ask for all the details they need to know, and they frequently won't know all the things they should be asking either. A pre-written offer lets you provide all of those answers, making sure nothing slips through the cracks. And an offer is, of course, a sales document in the end, so optimizing your wording is, of course, ideal. With pre-written offers, you can make sure everything is explained in the clearest and most appealing way. As I explain on the side, I suggest writing one script for each major area of editing you offer, one for copy editing, another for developmental editing, so that you can really streamline the process and you can extend that to different types of genres as well. Make some sections customizable, such as the intro, always have something to say about their book. This is like sometimes easier than others, but I always try to find something good to say and something to comment on in terms of praising, and then something to comment on in terms of what I would improve if I feel like I can do that without potentially stepping on an author's ego. You can also use a lot of your pre-existing writing and web copy to save time, and just make sure you're authentic to your voice and your work. You want an author who feels like they're a good fit for you, and they're going to select in and select out that way. If you try to make it too salesy, it will come across. Or if you try to make it too, something that's not you, that will really come across, and authors can really tell. So this is my structure for pre-written offers. First, introduction and personalization, talk about their book. Give some praise, give some gentle thoughts on areas for improvement, and/or thoughts on how to improve things. This is to get your client able to picture working with you and how you can help their book. But above all, it is to show you read their sample, because some editors do not read the sample, and some clients are not convinced that you read the sample reasonably. So it's always good to show that you understand their needs and care about the book. I personally also use this section to clarify that the final choice on edits always belongs to the authors. Many new authors will assume that even working with a freelance editor means they will lose control of their manuscript. I've literally had authors like very hesitantly ask me, how much control over my manuscript am I going to retain? It's like, I'm not a publisher. You get control over the whole thing. I'm here to help your book and your vision. And so that's so important to get across preemptively, I think, because so many authors imagine it's not already there. And so automatically that puts them on the defensive, that makes them worried about their work, which is, again, like, that's their baby. So showing you care about it and showing that you respect it is key. And that's what I mean on the slide by my editing philosophy. So for the next step, what my editing entails, which is in fact what I call it, this section should look different for each type of editing. But basically, what do you offer and what does that look like? For example, when you do developmental editing, make it clear to the client that they'll receive both a marked up manuscript and an editorial report. First is an editorial assessment, aka manuscript evaluation, where you're going to make clear that they're only receiving the editorial report. That sort of thing. You know, you also want to put in, do you do a call with your clients preemptively or throughout the process? How many rounds of editing do you offer? How do you expect, you know, or need anything from them at various points in the process? Then it comes to offer details, which is what it sounds like. Walk them through what you charge, the quote for the project timeline, means of communication, anything you'll need from them, and contract signing deals if relevant. I also personally like to avoid the words price and cost, if at all possible, and just go with the total comes to, because I think why raise the specter of scary words like price and cost if you don't have to? I also recommend sending this document either before or along with the contract. And you should definitely have a contract for freelance clients. There will be plenty of other resources and whole presentations you can find on why this is a great idea, but it's a great idea. Finally, on the pre-written offers, we get to the work samples, because the author's likely talking to multiple editors, or if it's just you, they may well just not remember your website very well by the time you get to the formal offer. So remind them why they should hire you. Add the title and links to 3 or 4 books you've worked on, preferably impressive and as relevant to the client's book as possible. And let that be part of your offer and part of your quote unquote resume for the job. So now let's talk more. That was about offers. Now let's talk more about resources for client questions. So like I said earlier, clients are often confused, overwhelmed, or don't know what they don't know. From the moment you start talking to a client, I genuinely think part of your job is to be their guide. Obviously, don't do this to the detriment of your paid work, but at the same time, I recommend viewing it as an investment. Take the opportunity to show some of the value you bring to the table. Demonstrate your knowledge, your expertise, and especially your helpfulness. Seriously, if you're an author who has to choose between multiple editors, who are you going to pick? Barring considerations like really dramatic price differences, it's probably the person who's been most helpful to you already. This is also a chance to demonstrate that you really get a client, that you really understand them in their book, whether before or after you've officially started working with them. And it's a way to provide extra customer satisfaction, hopefully get those nice little reviews and testimonials. When it comes to answering client questions, leveraging pre-existing resources is also so valuable because it lets you give them a ton of information without taking up a ton of your time. Linking to other resources is great in particular because it proves you're not just saying things, it proves that other people agree with you. And it introduces clients to other potential sources of publishing knowledge, making them more self-sufficient and more able to pursue their publishing goals. I particularly like to direct people to the websites of the Editorial Freelancers Association for rates info, and to the industry-leading blogs of Jane Friedman and Louise Harnby for most other info. I have a whole widespread index, but those are the kind of the 3 I cite most often. They're just very reliable resources that, in the case of the latter 2, cover a ton of territory, and also aren't potential competition for my clients for several reasons, which is, of course, very helpful. Linking to your competitors, not the best strategy if it can be avoided. So next, we're going to come back to what I mentioned earlier, and we're going to talk about text expanders. Text expanders, if you're not familiar, let you type in a couple letters and then automatically fill in a larger response, like you can see from the GIF I included in the presentation. Yes, I do pronounce it with a hard G. There are multiple free open source versions of this because text expanders are a type of resource, not a specific software. So you don't actually need to use, say, the text expander called Text Expander. That was very clever, tricky branding on their part, because it costs something like $3 a month. And hey, who needs an extra charge? So there's some premium and freemium versions if you want extra features, but the open source versions such as AutoHotkey, Esponso, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, and BeefText are also fairly powerful and robust themselves, each suited to different preferences. Like I said earlier, you can think of text expanders as kind of like macros. They're a similar time-saving shortcut, and if you're not familiar with macros, by the way, I highly recommend looking into the basics because they are huge time savers. And these work really similarly in that you press a few keys to make something specific and much more useful and detailed happen. You can also have a lot of fun editorializing with the codes for these. I decided some years ago I was going to learn from other people's mistakes on this and not my own. So I have a policy that I never, ever, ever put something in the comments or anywhere in a document that I wouldn't be okay with the client reading. Because sooner or later, if you put it in there, a client will read it. That's just how the universe works. So, but that doesn't mean I'm above queuing a text expander with /WTF or no. Petty, perhaps, but we all have to find our joys somewhere. So next and last, we're getting to the resource that Dave so kindly introduced at the start, which is my resource, the Big Little Booklet of Publishing Resources. As Dave said, I created this resource after a PPN meetup where several editors had mentioned they avoided working with new authors and even indie authors in general because they lost so much time explaining the basics of editing and publishing that it became far less profitable and tanked their hourly rates. I actually already had a solution for this problem, which was a giant bookmark folder of links I maintained labeled for author reference, which just contains links that answer all of the questions that I had to deal with multiple times. And I went, God, why is it taking so long to find a resource for this? Or God, why is it taking so long to type this out? So this booklet is a highlighted list of vetted links to answer questions around 10 major subject areas, including how to publish a book, how to self-publish, how to submit manuscripts, how to write with sensitivity, how to deal with copyright and permissions issues, the different types of editing, and more. You can use these at any stage of working with a client. Leveraging pre-existing resources to save yourself time, genuinely help authors, and enhance your own credibility. And if you're a new author yourself, I also encourage you to look at the links as a resource for your own education. This resource is available on my website at calvieditorial.com/resources, and it will always be pay what you can because while contributions are very much appreciated, I don't believe publishing success should be paywalled in an industry where I feel that is increasingly something that's happening. So with that, I hopefully wasn't talking too fast and overwhelming you guys, but let's go into the FAQ portion.
Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you. That was not only very edifying, but I really enjoyed the humor in that. I know it's hard when you do these kind of presentations and it's not like live where you hear sort of the response of people enjoying your humor, but I definitely did. So I wanted to let you know that. If people want to ask questions in the chat, we can take a look at them there. Also, I wanted to say, one of the great things I love about PPN and our professional development sessions in general is that I know a lot of people come to these with a wealth of experience too. And so if you have editorial resources that you want to share with everyone in the chat, feel free to do that. I will try to, what we'll do after this session is we are going to post this video up online. We'll do a general description. We'll have some of the links that MC has already mentioned, and we'll put them into the description. But if you have ones as well that you want to add in, we'll kind of vet them and make sure to include those as well. So one of the things that I wanted to say is you have a couple of resources on your website, not just this big little book of publishing resources, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That is correct. I also have a, what do I have on there? I also have a guide to making book proposals and a book proposal template, because that's something that I have had a specialization and a pretty good amount of success in. I actually have currently a 50% rate of getting my book proposal clients book contracts, so I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, I have that up there, and I am thinking about uploading some more resources, including for editor education, such as like a basic version of the nonfiction comp, what are nonfiction comp titles for authors, and then a advanced nonfiction comp titles for editors, because that's also something I specialized in as part of my acquisitions research and work at a number of presses.
Kate McKinley asked, do you or does anyone else have a good source for contract templates? So you talked about the importance of actually having a written contract that you sign with your clients. Did you find someone somewhere and then modify it and tweak it, or did you sort of evolve one over a period of time that's really pretty much your own?
Kind of a combination of both. I definitely found a number of templates and then kind of looked at, okay, what are the key elements in each? What, are articles and videos on courses on contracts saying, here are the things you need to include, and then kind of combine those into my own template. Although I will also say I actually get a lot of my work through Readsy. So they auto-generate the contracts for you, and I really like that because I hate paperwork.
Yeah, my guess is most of us who got into publishing didn't do it to get into the paperwork, but there is plenty of paperwork out there. So,
yeah.
Mary Claire Blakeman writes, first-time authors generally do not understand what it takes to market and sell a book. Do you have advice, resources for that aspect of publishing? And before you answer, MC, I just want to say that I know that I don't offer that resource, and I often use that as a way to kind of refer people to people I think are really good in the field. And so it's nice to be able to refer to that, but it's also, I think, great for them to get a basic understanding, some resource online. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's so true. I definitely have resources that I keep for myself. I don't have them. I don't believe in the booklet particularly because I wanted to focus more on the editorial side of things than the marketing. If that's something people are interested in, I'd be happy to put together another booklet or a little addendum, because that's definitely something I have a lot of resources for. And it's so true. A lot of authors are like, oh, well, I will start marketing my book a month before it comes out. And I sit there and go, will you now?
Yeah.
I like to, particularly with my editorial assessments and my developmental editing clients, I always do a call with them at the beginning of the project, which I find is really useful for a lot of reasons. It helps build the relationship. It helps make sure I get a sense of their voice and that we are on the same page about what they want and what they need and what they want me to look at the most. And then I also always take that as a chance to kind of counsel authors on the publishing process and walk them through, here is some of what it will take. Like, this is a depressing statistic, but 90% of self-published books will never sell more than 100 copies. On the other hand, though, that means that if you do sell more than 100 copies, you're automatically top 10% grade A student. So
Yeah,
that's how I like to frame it for my clients. But I find, citing that statistic, and TCK has some really useful, they have a publishing resources calculator. They have a publishing sales calculator. They have some really good resources on the numbers of self-publishing and the self-publishing market that I think are really helpful for getting authors to go, oh, this is something I need to be serious about. And if I care about sales, which some of them don't, and it's something I need to be serious about way earlier on than I thought I did.
TCK is
Great question. Um, it's still showing my PowerPoint, right? You're
yeah,
not seeing my messy screen as I Google.
yeah.
They're an independent and nonfiction book publisher. I think they may just be called TCK. I don't know that it stands for anything.
Okay, fair enough,
Um,
fair enough.
but
Okay,
yeah, I just
that's
looked up
fine.
their About Us and it doesn't seem to stand for anything.
Okay.
But they're kind of an innovative independent publishing company that has a lot of really good resources.
Yeah. I think also there's so much going on in the publishing landscape out there around hybrid publishing and distribution models like Amazon
Hmm.
and Ingram that they have to find out about those things and then figure out how marketing and promotion fits in within those universes. So it's a little bit hard to sort of provide resources right off the bat until you kind of have the conversation about the entire publishing process, which obviously can get complicated. Uh,
Yeah, that's part of why I like using these pre-existing links so much and why I had the giant bookmark folder that translated into the booklet, because I was like, I need to give these authors good information that will let them get through the publishing process in a way that makes them hopefully satisfied. But I also don't have hours of my time to explain it all every time I'm talking to someone.
yeah. Mary Claire also asked a great question that I know I've encountered plenty of times, and there's not an easy answer for. She writes, I'm finding that new authors now need more education on how to follow and respond to the track changes function in Word. Have you had that issue? And I don't think it's just part of the problem is it's not just Word, it's that there are multiple versions of Word, and depending on
Mm,
which version they're using, the interface could be different. And there are multiple interfaces, multiple ways to do any
mhm,
one thing. It can be really overwhelming. And sometimes, even when I'm trying to have a Zoom conversation with them, I'm realizing, oh, they're looking at something different from what I'm looking at because they have a different version of Word, or
mhm.
whatever. I know this realm also gets into the world of for PDF review later on in the publishing process after their typeset page proofs.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed as well. I actually, in my editorial letters for editorial assessments and developmental edits, as well as in my emails when I send copy edits, I just automatically include this is what track changes is. It's what I made the changes in. Here's how to see, here's the basics of how to use it. There's also an entire section in the booklet dedicated to how to use Word, which includes links for authors, how to use track changes, how to toggle track changes on and off, how to see different levels of markup. And my personal favorite hack, which is telling authors how to change the color of track changes, because getting edits is really intimidating for a lot of authors. Surprise, surprise, this is not new information to people. But I think it's a lot less intimidating, certainly as for me in my own work, when all of the edits are in like a nice, soothing aqua color instead of bright red high school English teacher grade giving you an F red pen.
That's a great little tip. I think that's really is helpful. And of course, there are always accessibility issues too, and people being able to see different colors and all that kind of thing. So it's good to have. Well, one of the things that we always come out of these professional development sessions is the importance of communication, and that's really at the heart of everything that you're doing here, which is having that communication with your clients early on so that there aren't surprises down the road and all that kind of thing. So yeah, thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about actually how useful it would be for someone who is, say, red-green colorblind and sees red as gray. Like, yeah, that would be really hard to see the edits in.
Yeah.
So it's a really good thing for that as well. Unfortunately, Microsoft Word stores what color track changes is in the individual program on your computer, not in the document. So you can't just set it to like a nice aqua and send it to clients. Dear God, do I wish you could do that, frankly, but you can't. So I kind of have a tip in and a link to further how to in my letters on how to do that yourself.
Yeah. Obviously, there are also some big companies that are in the world of maximizing Word's editing features and macro features. And they, and then there are some smaller ones that have little packages that you can subscribe for, something like $49 a year. Do you rely on any that you feel comfortable sharing or not?
Yeah, I use Perfect It because Perfect It is great and it's often a little humbling. Perhaps when you go through and you're like, oh, I thought I had standardized that a bit more successfully than I actually did. But yeah, I use Perfect It. I would really recommend it to anyone. For those who don't know, it's basically a giant macro, but it's a plugin for Word basically that goes through and checks standardization, checks capitals, footnotes, bulleted lists, different acronyms, all these different categories of things. It's incredibly customizable and it definitely saves a ton of time for me.
Good to know. Excellent.
Yeah, and I use some of Paul Beverly's macros as well, which would also recommend to anyone. Paul Beverly, great human being who has put together a great resource of literally hundreds and hundreds of free macros that are available online.
Great. We'll put some resources around this. How about any sort of groups, editorial groups that is a good support resource for support? I'm thinking in Facebook groups or Reddit groups or anything like that. Do you participate in any of those?
Yeah, so I'm a member of and a big fan of the LGBTQ Editors Association, which is a really great resource and source of support. Also for especially like, when you need a quicker answer to any kind of question, the Editors Association of Earth group on Facebook is really large, really active, and really helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much. Peter Goodman, this is not a question, but a share. We always ask for them to create manuscripts in Word, but unformatted and with no centering, no double spaces, no tabs to align columns, etc. Just plain vanilla. But that makes writers uncomfortable and no weird fonts. I think Peter is starting up a website called noweirdfonts.com, but I'll check in with him to see if it's live yet. Do you find that sometimes you get these sort of where someone has obviously been sharing their manuscript and done a lot of where they've just embedded a ton of formatting that then you somehow have to kind of work your way through, and maybe that's a little bit of a diplomacy minefield as well?
I haven't had too many problems with that. I usually, partly perhaps because I usually just turn off track changes, change the display and font settings, and then change it back at the end. Sometimes in the past, I have forgotten to change it back on one occasion. So I did get one editor who was like, or one author who was like, why did you send my manuscript back in Comic Sans? Which, in my defense, listen, Comic Sans, this frustrates me so much that it works, but it works. One of the most valuable hacks I've ever found for like editor's block, when you look at a manuscript and you just can't get into it, can't keep going, is change the font to Comic Sans.
Interesting.
Genuinely pisses me off, but it helps so much. Partly, I think, because Comic Sans is literally easier and faster on the brain to read. That's why it's actually a really dyslexia-friendly font, although most people don't know that. And it's really hard to take you or yourself or your work too seriously when the font is Comic Sans.
That is great. That is really, wow. That is a tip that I was not expecting. So that was great. Wonderful. We don't have any other questions in the chat, but it's going to take us about 48 to 72 hours to get the video up online. If you have a question that you didn't think of during this video, please go ahead and email to operations@pubpronetwork.org. I will confer with MC and maybe they'll have a good response, and we'll include it in the description and any of the other links that we think are worth sharing along with the video. So I love these lunch sessions, 45 minutes. We already have someone who's saying, just got your booklet, MC, and it looks fantastic. Thank you. How great is
Thank
that?
you.
Yeah, so great. Already got a blurb. Anyway, so thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna, I think I have an option to unmute folks if they want to. Yes, you have the ability to unmute. And if you want to thank MC, otherwise we will be meeting again next month on some wonderful professional development session. And if you have an idea for something you'd like covered in a professional development session, please let us know, and we will work to see if we have the resources to find someone to do a good presentation on it. And MC, I cannot thank you enough. This is great. And I too have downloaded the PDF already. And please, I think it's just wonderful, great resource to have. It's so much nicer looking than one of those tab folders of saved URLs. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great, and I'm really glad people found this helpful.
Good, good, good. Well, thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time. We have another social Zoom meetup on the third Thursday. Is that this Thursday? I think it is, of the month. I will be there and hope to see you there. And we'll have this video up, and we'll send out emails letting you know when it's available, if in case for those folks who want to see it again or didn't make it to the actual meeting. So thank you again. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you guys so much. Oh, I just saw oh, no, okay, everyone's left. I was just saw there was a question in the chat we didn't get to from Jenica Dotson.
Oh, no.
So
we're recording.
Okay. Hi, Jenica. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I just saw your question. You're asking, I'd love to hear some of your usual pitch for indie publishing. I've had a tough time figuring out how to approach that discussion with first-time authors whose hearts are set on trad publishing in a way that won't sound like I'm telling them their book isn't good enough. How do you go about that? So first of all, I think I have it a little easier, perhaps as a function of my genre, focusing in self-help. I actually don't get very many authors whose hearts are set on trad pub. They're usually more focused on self-publishing, and delighted to hear there's an alternative in the middle that will let them, get a publisher without having to go through everything of traditional publishing. That said, my pitch for indie publishing is usually to send a few links, because that is what I default to as a person. There's a reason I created this resource, and just kind of talk it up. And also, I like to really emphasize you don't need the benefits to the author, how much time it saves because you don't need an agent. One of the things I find really helpful is to emphasize that, if you go with TradPub, you are looking at absolute minimum 3 years before your book hits shelves. And indie publishing can cut easily a year off that timeline. Self-publishing, of course, is even faster. I also find it's helpful to just say, it is my policy to tell authors that I always recommend X publishing to people. Usually I am saying self-publishing, but I think it could work for indie publishing as well, because then it's not a reflection on their books, it's a reflection on how much you believe in indie publishing.
Wow, what a great response, because I think that, I am an independent publisher as well, and so I'm a big proponent of all the benefits that come with that. It's not going to be a huge advance, but you are probably going to get a lot more care than you might elsewhere. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and there's this whole new realm of hybrid publishing as well, which is something in between, either self-publishing or traditional publishing, but it's not quite vanity press, but you are much
Hmm.
more in control, and you're going to be paying more for it as well. So
Hmm.
all of those sort of ever-evolving new options out there are things that we can offer to folks. So, and I don't even know that much about hybrid publishing, but I know people who know about hybrid publishing, and maybe that's the next professional development session, introducing people to hybrid publishing. So we'll see. But anyway, thank you so much, and thank you
Yes.
for catching that I missed that question. We didn't have so many questions that I don't have a good excuse for that one, and that was a really good question and a great response. So thank you for that.
Yeah, like I said, thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.